The alien empire discovered humanity's forbidden weapon too late. The silence before. The Vorthak Dominion had conquered 11,000 worlds in 6,000 years, and not once had they lost a war. Their fleets moved like a single organism, coordinated by the Hive Mind Council, a collective consciousness spread across 9,000 starships and stitched together by quantum entanglement. When the Dominion decided a species was to be absorbed, it was absorbed. When a species resisted, it was erased, not out of cruelty, the Vorthak told themselves, but out of necessity. Resistance was inefficient. Erasure was clean. So when the scout ship Ashal Ren drifted into the outer edges of Sol System in the year humans called 2147, its purpose was simple: catalogue, assess, report. The species on the third planet called themselves human. They had barely left their solar system. Their weapons were primitive: chemical rockets, fission warheads, railguns that would scratch the paint of a Vorthak dreadnought and nothing more. Commander Ereth Solkon, a mid-ranking officer with cold violet eyes and 4 centuries of conquest behind her, filed the report herself. Threat assessment: negligible. Recommend standard absorption protocol. Estimated resistance: 3 weeks, if any. She was wrong. She would not live long enough to regret it. 2. First contact. The invasion began, as it always did, with a broadcast. A voice modulated to sound almost gentle boomed across every human frequency simultaneously: radio, television, satellite, the deep fiber optic veins beneath the oceans. People of Earth, you are now under the jurisdiction of the Vorthak Dominion. Resistance is statistically futile and will result in unnecessary casualties. Submit, and you will be integrated. Refuse, and you will be removed. For 6 hours, Earth's governments argued, panicked, prayed, and armed themselves. Fighter jets scrambled. Nuclear silos opened their eyes to the sky. News anchors wept on air while trying to sound calm. Then the first Vorthak landing craft descended over Reykjavik, and humanity's answer arrived not as a treaty, but as a silence. No missiles launched. No jets scrambled to intercept. The sky, strangely, stayed quiet. The Vorthak found this unnerving. Every species reacted to invasion with violence, however futile. Humans reacted with nothing at all. Commander Ereth ordered a second landing craft down over what her sensors identified as a military research facility buried beneath the Rocky Mountains, a place humans called, in files the Dominion's translators struggled to render precisely, Project Chrysalis. The craft never landed. It simply stopped existing.
No explosión. No debris. No radiation spike.
One moment it was 3 kilometers above the mountain range. The next, the Dominion's tracking system reported only empty space where 200 tons of alloy and 11 crew members had been. Ereth stared at the readout for a long time before she spoke. Recalibrate the sensors. That can't be right. It was right. It would keep being right, over and over, for the next 4 months. 3. The vanishing. The Vorthak were not fools. 6,000 years of conquest had taught them patience, and patience taught them to study before they struck again. Ereth pulled every landing craft back to orbit and began instead with reconnaissance drones, small, cheap, expendable things that could be lost without consequence. Of the 200 drones sent toward the coordinates of Project Chrysalis, 197 vanished the moment they crossed an invisible boundary roughly 4 kilometers in diameter around the facility. The remaining 3, positioned at the very edge of that boundary, captured something the Dominion's analysts would spend weeks trying to understand: a shimmer in the air, like heat distortion, and then nothing. Not destruction. Not an explosion. The drones simply were, and then simply were not, as though someone had reached out and erased them from the story of the universe rather than killing them within it. The Hive Mind Council convened an emergency session. 9,000 ships' worth of consciousness turned its attention, for the first time in 3 centuries, to a single unremarkable planet. What is this weapon? The council asked, its voice a chorus of 1,000,000 minds speaking as one through Eretha's neural interface. Unknown, Ereth admitted. It does not match any known energy signature. It does not appear to convert matter to energy, as our own weapons do. It simply removes. Removes to where? Unknown. There was a pause in the collective consciousness, a rare thing, since the council rarely hesitated on anything. Continue the invasion. Avoid the facility. We will absorb the rest of the planet and isolate this anomaly for later study. It was, in hindsight, The second worst decision the Vorthak Dominion ever made. 4. The war that wasn't. For 3 months, the Dominion took Earth the way they had taken every world before it, city by city, continent by continent, meeting human militaries that fought bravely and died in the tens of thousands, their railguns and jets and submarines scratching uselessly against shields that had never failed before. But something was wrong, and the wrongness grew with each passing week. Human resistance fighters who should have been captured kept disappearing from Vorthak holding facilities, not escaping, not being rescued, simply gone, along with sections of the walls around them, as though reality itself had declined to keep them prisoner. Interrogators reported subjects who answered every question calmly, almost pityingly, before vanishing mid-sentence in restraints that remained perfectly intact, still fastened around empty air. Ereth began receiving reports she didn't know how to file. A human scientist in Geneva, captured for interrogation, had looked into the eyes of her Vorthak captor and said, in perfect Vorthak, a language no human should have been able to speak, "You should leave. He's almost ready." Then she was gone. The restraints stayed closed. Who is he? Ereth demanded of every human prisoner brought before her after that. None of them would answer. Most of them looked at her not with fear, but with something closer to sorrow. By the 4th month, Ereth had lost contact with 30% of her ground forces, not defeated, not destroyed, simply unaccounted for, vanished from the world in ones and twos and sometimes entire platoons, always without a trace, always without warning. Vorthak soldiers began refusing orders to patrol near mountain ranges, near old military bases, near anywhere that showed up on the classified maps her intelligence officers had recovered from human servers with the label Chrysalis Exclusion Zone. The Council grew impatient. Send a full battle group to the facility. End this. Ereth, against 6,000 years of Dominion doctrine, hesitated. I recommend further study. You recommend caution against an unarmed research bunker on a planet with railguns and chemical rockets. She had no answer that didn't sound insane. So she obeyed. The battle group. 41 warships descended on the Rocky Mountains on what humans would later call the Day of Ashes. Orbital bombardment first, precise, overwhelming, designed to crack the mountain open like an egg and expose whatever was hiding beneath it. The mountain did not crack. The bombardment simply stopped reaching it. Beam weapons capable of boiling oceans struck the 4-kilometer boundary around Project Chrysalis and simply ceased to exist 100 meters short of their target, their energy unaccounted for, gone as if it had never been fired at all. Then the boundary began to grow. Slowly at first, a few meters an hour, then faster, expanding outward from the mountain like a held breath finally released. Wherever it passed, Vorthak ships in low orbit lost contact with their ground crews. Soldiers on the surface reported the sky itself seeming to flicker, as though the universe were a page being turned, and on the other side of that flicker, nothing Vorthak remained. Ereth watched from orbit as 3 of her 41 warships, hovering directly above the epicenter, simply blinked out of her sensor array. Not destroyed. Not falling. Removed, the way the drones had been removed, the way the soldiers had been removed, the way, she now understood with a cold and total certainty, anything the boundary decided did not belong would be removed. Status report, the Council demanded, its collective voice fraying with something the Dominion had not felt in 6,000 years, uncertainty. They're gone, Ereth said. Not dead. Gone. Wherever this weapon sends things, it isn't anywhere our instruments can find. Belay retreat. Continue the offensive. We do not retreat from primitives. Counselor. Continue the offensive. Ereth gave the order. It would be the last order she ever gave. 6. What waited beneath the mountain? Deep inside Project Chrysalis, in a chamber built 40 years earlier by scientists who had watched too many warning signs in the night sky and decided humanity needed an answer no enemy could outfight, a man named Dr. Elias Okafor watched a bank of monitors and felt, for the first time in a long career defined by dread, something like peace. Chrysalis was not a weapon in any sense the Vorthak understood. It was not a gun, or a bomb, or a shield. It was a question, asked of reality itself, phrased in mathematics so far beyond conventional physics that only 3 people alive fully understood the equations that ran it. The theory had a simple, almost embarrassing name in the original research notes: selective excision. In practice, it did something almost obscene in its simplicity. It did not destroy the matter and energy within its boundary. It asked space-time, politely and with total authority, to no longer include it. Where the excised material went, no one, Not even Okafor, not even the machine's own diagnostic systems, could say. It simply was not, anywhere in the observable universe, and the space it once occupied closed over the absence like water over a dropped stone. The system had been built as a last resort, an unfireable gun kept loaded for 40 years against a threat the world's governments hoped would never come. It had never been tested at full scale. It had never been meant to be tested at full scale, because full scale meant the world had already lost every other option. The world had lost every other option in month 1. Okafor turned to the woman beside him, Director Priya Chandrasekhar, the last surviving member of the original design team, her hair gone entirely grey in the 4 months since the sky had first spoken. Boundaries at 11 kilometers and holding steady, she said. Their fleet is falling back. Are you certain it's holding? Not still growing? I'm certain of nothing, Chandrasekhar said, with the exhausted honesty of someone who had spent 4 months lying to a species that could read minds it didn't understand and diseases it hadn't caught. But the models say it stabilizes once nothing hostile remains inside the boundary. It isn't a weapon that kills. It's a weapon that says no, and it keeps saying no until there's nothing left to say no to. On the monitor, the last of the Vorthak warships hanging over the Rocky Mountains turned, engines flaring, and began a retreat that no vessel of the Dominion had executed in 6,000 years of unbroken conquest. They're leaving, Okafor said, disbelieving even as he watched it happen. They're leaving, Chandrasekhar agreed. For now. 7. The report no one wanted to file. Aboard the flagship Caltheris, orbiting a planet the Dominion had believed, for months earlier, would fall in 3 weeks, the Hive Mind Council convened its final session on the matter of Earth. Commander Ereth Solkon was not present. Her shuttle had been 3 kilometers inside the expanding boundary when it stopped growing, and the Council had not yet decided how to file 4 centuries of service under a report heading that simply read, Removed. Recommendation, the Council intoned, to the sub-commander who now held Eretha's former authority, a nervous, junior officer named Threll who had never expected to inherit a command this way. Sir, Counselor, we do not understand this weapon. We cannot counter it, cannot detect it before it activates, cannot predict its range. Our beam weapons do not damage it. Our shields do not stop it. It does not kill our soldiers. It ends them, retroactively, as though they were never deployed at all. I recommend. Threll hesitated, aware that no Vorthak officer in 6 millennia had ever said the words about to leave his mouth. I recommend full withdrawal from the system. The silence in the Council's collective mind stretched long enough that Threll began to wonder if he would be removed, too, in whatever manner the Council reserved for officers who suggested retreat. The Dominion does not retreat, the Council said at last, and for the first time in Threll's service, the chorus of a million minds sounded less like certainty and more like something trying very hard to convince itself. We reassess. We withdraw to study range and understand the weapon's limits. We will return when we understand what we face. It was, Threll understood even as he relayed the order, a retreat wearing the mask of strategy. The Dominion ships broke orbit within the hour, engines burning hard enough to leave scorch trails visible from the planet's surface, 11,000 years of unbroken conquest ending not with a battle won, but with a battle they could not even properly perceive. 8. Aftermath. Earth's governments never learned exactly how close humanity had come to needing the weapon's full, unbounded potential, the version of Chrysalis that could have unmade not just an invasion force, but the ozone layer, the magnetic field, the very atmosphere, if the mathematics had ever needed to be pushed that far to win. Okafor and Chandrasekhar burned that portion of the research themselves, in the weeks after the retreat, agreeing without needing to discuss it that some doors, once opened all the way, could never again be closed. They kept the smaller door, the one that had been enough. 3 years later, when Vorthak scout ships returned at the very edge of the Oort cloud, cautious, distant, watching, they found a species that had not weaponized its cities, had not built armadas, had not done any of the things a species that had just repelled an interstellar empire should have done. They found a planet that had simply gone back to living, the mountain in Colorado quietly sealed, its exclusion zone still marked on every map, its equations locked in a vault that only 3 living people could open, and every one of them had sworn, in writing and in something closer to prayer, never to open it again unless the sky spoke first. The Vorthak Dominion filed Earth, at last, under a threat classification that had never before existed in 6,000 years of records. Do not engage. Reason, unknown. Outcome, unacceptable. And far below, in a mountain that had once nearly unmade a fleet, Dr. Elias Okafor visited the sealed vault every year on the anniversary of the retreat, not to check on the weapon, but to remind himself of the thing he'd learned in the 4 months it took to fire it, that the most dangerous weapon a species could ever build was not the one that killed the most efficiently. It was the one that never needed to be seen to win. The end.